Hey everybody, welcome into my review for Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, the HD remake of the game. I recently played through this game again and I want to give my thoughts on it and do a review on the game. Shin Megami Tensei 3 released in Japan in 2003, and then a director's cut version of the game called the Maniacs version was released in 2004, featuring Dante, the main character of the Devil May Cry series, as a playable character in the game. There was also tons of additional stuff added to this version of the game, such as additional areas, more boss fights, and a lot of other changes to the game. America first got Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne on the PlayStation 2 in 2004, and we got the Director's Cut Maniacs Edition that Japan originally got in 2004. Later on, a HD remake that would be released on PlayStation 4, PC on the Steam platform, and also Nintendo Switch would be released in Japan in 2020, and then worldwide 2021. The footage I used in this review is of the Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD remake on the PlayStation 4 version. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne was a big change for the Shin Megami Tensei mainline series. Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2, which are both awesome games by the way, and I highly recommend them and hope to review them in the future, were games that were both first-person RPGs. In both games, all battles were in first person, and all exploration took place from a first-person point of view. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne changed all of this, and the entire game takes place from a third-person point of view. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne starts off innocently enough with its story. You play the role of a student who gets off the subway at Shinjuku, Tokyo to go meet with your friends and to go see your teacher. You go to the hospital where your teacher is at, but you notice something is weird. The hospital is completely empty and it seems to be completely abandoned, and only you and your friends seem to be the only ones there. You also cannot find your teacher anywhere in the hospital at all. Eventually, you find your teacher, and your teacher tells you to meet her on the roof of the hospital. At the roof of the hospital, your teacher tells you about an event called the Conception that is about to happen. Your teacher explains to you about the Conception and tells you that the entire world and humanity is pretty much going to be wiped out, and the world is going to be put into a state known as the Vortex World. In the Vortex World, someone with a great amount of power can recreate the world in the way that they see fit, and basically the Vortex World is going to have different factions and people competing against each other, trying to gain a large amount of power so they can recreate the world and society in a way that they see fit. Your teacher informs you that it is your fate to survive through the Conception as one of the few human survivors who will make it through the event. The Conception then happens and almost all of humanity is completely wiped out from the world, and the world goes into the vortex state. When you regain consciousness after the event happens, you are greeted by a young boy with blonde hair who has an old lady accompanying him. The boy grabs a bug called a magatama and drops it inside the protagonist's mouth. The protagonist digests the bug and his body undergoes a transformation. When he reawakens, his body is now changed and he is a half-human, half-demon person known as a demi-fiend. After waking up in the new world with your new body and your new powers, you find out that the new world is inhabited by monsters called demons. In this new world, you go around looking for other human survivors and trying to save yourself and trying to save others while battling your way through the monsters that have now inhabited this new world. You end up running into different factions and organizations. These different organizations and factions are fighting over an energy source known as Magatsui. If somebody gains enough Magatsui, they can recreate the world in the way that they want. The game's story is all about recreating the world, and it tries to ask the player, what kind of world would you make? How would the world be? What kind of world would you make if you could recreate the world? Nocturne's story is so great because the game is not a story of good versus evil like most RPG games. Nocturne's story is very original because it's not about some hero going out to save the world from evil. It's a game that challenges your worldview, it challenges your philosophical views and how you view the world should be. The game really makes you think about your societal values, the way you think society should be, the world should be, and that is something that is very original and very creative. And I really like the original storytelling in this game. In addition, as you go throughout the game, there are different organizations that are fighting each other to try and recreate the world in their vision. You can choose to align yourself with these organizations and recreate the world in their vision, or alternatively, you can choose to align yourself with none of them. Depending on the choices you make in the story and who you align yourself with, it'll lead to different story events, different boss fights, and different endings to the game. This gives the game a lot of replay value. Now, with the story being discussed about what Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is all about in terms of the story, let's start talking about the gameplay and what the game plays like. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne is a turn-based RPG. It has you playing the role of a silent protagonist, and like other RPGs, you go to different areas. Some areas of the game are towns where you can save your file, you can heal up, or you can go to stores to buy items from the stores. Other areas in the game are like traditional RPG dungeons where you have to travel from the beginning of the dungeon to the end solving puzzles and usually fighting a boss at the end of the dungeon. In between towns and dungeons, you'll travel across the world map. On the world map, you show up as a blue icon and you can move to new areas. While you're traveling across the world map, you also have a chance to get into random battles against enemies as well. Unlike other JRPG games where you get a party of multiple human characters to battle with, Nocturne is very different. Nocturne is a monster collecting type of RPG game. For the vast majority of the game, the protagonist is the only human character you have in your group. Instead, the game is all about recruiting monsters and having them join your party. As you travel throughout Nocturne, whether you're in dungeons or in world maps or even in towns, you can get into random battles like other RPGs. During battles, you have a few different options. You can attack monsters to fight them, and if you defeat them, you get EXP and money. During battles, instead of fighting enemies, if you want, you can also try to talk to enemies and negotiate with them. And depending on how successful you are with negotiating with them, they might join you, and then you can have them in your party and battle with them. As you continue to fight more and more battles, you can get more and more experience points in SMT Nocturne. Eventually, you will level up upon getting enough experience to level. One of the really cool things I like about the leveling in Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is that you can put points into your stacks and build your main character differently. And also, unlike Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2, where the main character could not use magic, in Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, the main character can do physical attacks and can also wear magic as well. I believe this was a very good change for the main character compared to Shin Megami Tensei 1 and 2, where the main character was very one-dimensional and could only use physical attacks. One thing I did think was a big step back in character customization in SMT3 Nocturne, though, is that you no longer get weapons or armor for your main character. In SMT 1 and 2, you could buy guns and swords for your main characters, but in SMT Nocturne, you get no weapons or armor. Instead, the main character can equip Magatama, which give him different skills upon leveling up. Each Magatama also changes his resistances and weaknesses to certain types of attacks as well, and boosts his stacks a certain amount. Getting back to the battles in Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, once you choose to fight, you'll be introduced to the game's battle system, which is known as the press turn battle system. In battles, you have 4 turn icons in the upper right. Each action you take in battle consumes one of the press turns. However, there is an exception. You can pass the character's turn to only use half a turn. It gets more in depth though. Whenever you hit enemy's weakness or you critical hit an enemy in battle, you'll not only do a higher amount of damage, but you will also be granted an extra turn. The same applies to enemies as well. If they hit your weakness, they get an extra turn. If they critical hit you, they get an extra turn as well. Now, if you hit an enemy and they nullify your attack and they resist it, then you will lose turns. Same if you miss with an attack. If you miss with an attack or an enemy does, whoever misses loses turns. The battle system in the game is really well done because it's easy to pick up and understand, and it adds a lot more depth to the combat than just a normal RPG battle system with no extra stuff added. Now in Nocturne, you can have a team of up to 4 people to battle with. Your team will usually consist of the main character and then also 3 other monsters that you recruited to battle with you. Recruiting new monsters to join you and battle with you is one of the coolest aspects of SMT Nocturne. Each monster gets their own strengths and weaknesses, their own abilities, they learn, and they level up as they gain EXP. Some monsters will also evolve into another monster if you level them up enough. Due to all the different monsters you can recruit, Nocturne has a tremendous amount of party customization and team building that you can do with all the different monsters you can recruit and battle with in the game. Now, with the monsters that you recruit from battle, you can go to an area called the Cathedral of Shadows. In the Cathedral of Shadows, you can do a process with the monsters that you recruit, the demons that you get, called Demon Fusion, where you can combine them to make a new demon, a new monster, who can inherit the skills of the demons made to make them. And because of this, you can make a bunch of new monsters by combining monsters through fusion, and you can carry their skills over to a new monster and have a ton of customization. The amount of customization the fusion system brings in Nocturne is really unparalleled by almost any other RPG out there, except other Shin Megami Tensei games. What you can also do at the Cathedral of Shadows is register monsters and demons that you recruit to a demon compendium, so that when you fuse them, if you want to get that monster back, you can go into the compendium and summon them back for a certain amount of money. With all the amount of customization in the game and all the different monsters you can get, there's just so many different ways you can build different teams in the game. It's one of the best aspects of this game. There's a lot of really cool monsters that you can make in the game and a lot of really cool monsters that you can get to join you. One other great thing about SMT Nocturne is that the game does have bonus optional content. There's an entire optional dungeon in the game called the Amala Labyrinth, which is made of 5 different sections. If you make it near the very end of it, you can get Dante from the Devil May Cry series to join your team, and he is absolutely awesome to have. Personally, I'm a big Devil May Cry fan. Devil May Cry 3 Dante's Awakening is probably my favorite action game of all time, so getting to have the main character from that game team up with me is absolutely awesome. Getting to the end of the Amal Labyrinth also gives you the chance to get a secret ending in the game and fight quite possibly the most difficult boss in the entire game. Now, all this being talked about, what are some of the flaws of SMT Nocturne? An issue with SMT Nocturne's gameplay is that it can be very overwhelming to new players. The first time I played through it, there was a lot of things that confused me. The game explains very little, and if you're new to the series, it can be a bit tricky to learn some of the game mechanics. Another aspect of the game that people might not like is the team building aspect. For certain boss fights, you might have to get certain monsters on your team with resistances to certain attacks, or you might need a certain ability to win a boss fight. In some boss fights, if you don't have a very specific ability or very certain team setup, it can be very, very difficult to win a boss fight. And some people don't want to have to build an entire team around a boss fight to win the boss fight. But on the other hand, some people really like to do that. And for people that like to do that, they're really going to enjoy this game. Another thing people might not be into is the story of SMT Nocturne and the way the story is told. The story of the game is very minimal. While in the beginning there's a fair amount of story, once you get past the very beginning, the story in the rest of the game is very minimal. Story scenes are few and far between, and most of them are very brief and maybe only last 3 to 5 minutes max. The game does a good job of getting the point across in its cutscenes in a timely, concise manner, but for those looking for a JRPG game with a super in-depth story with incredibly well-developed characters and tons of dialogue and backstory, then this might not be the type of game story that you will really like. If you're someone who doesn't care much for story in video games and you'd like to get back to the gameplay quick, or you like story but you like scenes that are quick and to the point, then you'll really end up liking the minimal storytelling approach of SMT Nocturne. The next flaw to bring up is with the music. The music in the game is actually fantastic. The songs are very well composed, but the problem is that the music in the game is very compressed. And because of that, the music quality for the songs in the game is very bad. Basically, what ended up happening was that when they put the game's music files onto the game disc back on the PlayStation 2 original version, they heavily compressed the game files so that the music files would take up less space on the game disc. And in doing so, they greatly lowered the sound quality of the music files. Now, the last 2 things I want to talk about are the game difficulty and the length of the game, how long the game takes to beat. Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne has a reputation of being a very difficult RPG. Personally, I think the best way I can describe the difficulty of the game to people is to compare different people and different types of people who are going to be playing the game. If you're brand new to Shin Megami Tensei and you're going to be playing Nocturne as your first game, the game is going to be very difficult. It's going to be quite brutal in terms of difficulty. Now, meanwhile, if you're somebody who played a few Shin Megami Tensei games, you've been in a few of them, then Nocturne will probably be above average difficulty for you, but it's not going to be like crazy difficult. Shin Megami Tensei in the HD remake has 3 difficulty modes, by the way. So all of what I was saying earlier is assuming that you were playing on the normal default difficulty. Now, if you really want a challenge from the game, you can go and put the game on the hard mode difficulty. And if you put it on hard mode, every enemy does double damage to you. The AI is smarter. They'll hit your weaknesses a lot more often. Another aspect of hard mode that makes it even harder is that the prices for items in stores go up by like 3 to 4 times the amount of what they are in normal difficulty. Now let's talk about the different versions of the HD remake. So there's the Switch version, and I think that one is the worst version. The reason why is because it has major performance problems. The game has a lot of slowdown during battles where you'll do an attack and the game slows down dramatically. The PS4 version runs a lot better. There's no slowdown almost ever, and pretty much the PC version is a lot better as well. It has almost no slowdown provided you have a good PC, and you can also adjust the graphical settings like anti-aliasing and all that type of stuff as well. As for how long the game will take to beat, the length of SMT Nocturne to beat the game will be at least 30 hours for a first time playthrough of the main story. But that's going to wrap up my review of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne. Overall, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I think the gameplay in it is absolutely incredible. The battle system is a lot of fun. The game has an incredible amount of customization. You can get so many different monsters to build your team with. If you're really into monster collecting RPG type of games, this game is a must play. There's just so many different teams you can build, so many different ways to approach boss fights and battles. The game is just so good gameplay wise. The game has a very unique, innovative story that instead of going the traditional RPG route where it's good versus evil, it has more of a philosophical story that makes you consider your worldview, your societal views, and what kind of world you would want to build. And the game overall is just really fantastic. It's such an underrated game. This game really should be played by more people. If you are a fan of RPGs, if you are someone who likes monster collecting RPG games, this game gets my highest recommendation. As always, guys, I want to say a big thank you for watching the video. I really greatly appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and also follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Shockstorm. I really greatly appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next video. Thank you all and have a great day, everybody.